Hey guys, what's going on? In this video, we'll be learning about iterations and loops. So there are two loops that we use in Python. They are for loop and while loop. We'll be covering both of them in detail. Now, in there are several applications of for loops when we talk about it. So remember, we used to iterate through the values inside loops, tuples, dictionaries, and even strings, right? Okay, so let's start off with for loops. So first application of for loops is to iterate through those values. So let's recap it. So first of all, let's iterate through strings. Now let's declare a variable, say st equals to for string. Let's say hello, and if we want to access the entire character of hello, right? Each characters of hello. For that, we can make use of for loop for, and we can pass a dummy variable. So let's put dummy variable as I. Then you pass the in operator in, then you should pass the variable which you want to iterate through, right? So in this case, st is the variable, and you put a colon, then enter. So you should know that once you put colon, the space should be automatically indented. Now once it's indented, you can print those items by saying print I. So in this case, I will iterate through the entire string character by character, so we can access HELLO. So let's print it and see the result. There you go. So that was about how you iterate through the characters inside a string variable. Now let's quickly iterate through a variable list. Now to do that, let's create a variable, say lst for list. Let's pass some variable, say hello. Then we can pass 1, 2, 3.5, and so on. Okay. Now let's print access each value by using a for loop, or more in technical terms, we should say let's iterate through the values inside the list. For that, same we use for loop, and for a dummy variable, say to make sense, let's use items in lst colon enter, and let's print the items. So once again, I tell you that items is a dummy variable. You can use any variable you want. So if you print it, it will access each values inside the list. So in this case, it printed every value. Okay, let me clear the screen. Okay, now let's iterate through a tuple. Now iterating through three tuples are pretty different. So let's say tup, and let's pass a tuple here. Let's say 1, 2, hello, hi. So iterating through tuples are same. So let's pass tup here, and if you print it, it will print the entire values inside tuples. Good. So that was about how you iterate through the values inside tuples. Now we also discussed about iterating through dictionaries, right? So let's create a variable, say dictionary, and let's create a dictionary very quick. 1, hello, 2, bye. Okay, so I have a basic dictionary here with keys as 1, 2, 3 integers, and the values as strings hello, bye, and bye bye. Now let's iterate through all these, and let's see what's the output. So we can see for items in dictionary, and if I print the items, you would notice it will print me the keys for it. Now that's because by default in dictionary, when you loop through the values, it will only access the keys. Now you could have also done something like dictionary dot keys here, but I just use dictionary to tell you that both of them gives the same result. So if you do this also, it will give us the same keys. Now you can also iterate through the values instead. So for that, instead of using dictionary or dictionary dot keys, we have to do dictionary dot values. So if you try to print it, it will instead print the values hello, bye, and bye bye. Now if you want to iterate through both the values, we can pass dictionary dot items. Now what it does is dictionary dot items returns as a tuple of key and value. So what it does is items is accessing this tuple and printing it. So let's print it and we will see the result. So as you can see here is dictionary dot items, what it does, it converted it into a list of tuples. So to be more precise, what dictionary dot items did is it created a list containing key 1, value 1 as a tuple, then another tuple, key 2, value 2, and so on. So if you remember earlier that we used for loop to access the values inside the list, The same way, dictionary or items is a list, and we are accessing the individual values. In this case, the values are entire tuples each. So key 1 value 1 tuple is a first tuple, key 2 value 2 is second tuple. So that's why you are getting 1 hello, 2 bye, 3 bye bye as a result. So that's how you iterate through the dictionaries. Now let's iterate through something more advanced. So let's iterate through a loop containing tuples. So let's create a list of tuples, lsttup equals to, let's pass a 1 2 3 and the tuple say hello, hi, and bye. In this case, we are having a list of tuples. Now, as I told you before, we can access each individual tuple by passing a dummy variable, say items in lsttup. And if I were to print items, you would see that it will print the first tuple 1 2 3, and then it will print hello, hi, bye. So let's run it and see the output. There you go. Now, what I want to do is I want to access the individual values inside the tuple and print it. For that, there is a very cheeky method. So instead of passing items, we pass those many number of variables as there are elements in each tuple. In this case, we have 3 elements in each tuple. So we need to pass 3 variables. Say, okay, let me type A, B, C in lsttup. And if I try to print A, okay, let me, this is first, then I print A, this is second, B, this is third. But I run it, you would see that it has accessed the individual elements inside tuple. So in order to be more precise, A will take care of the first element of each tuples, in this case 1 and hello. So if you can see, I have written this is for, okay, let me actually increase this. Okay, so you can see A is taking care of the first elements 1 and hello. B is taking care of the second elements 2 and hi, 2 and hi, and so on. Now here a question arises. What happens if I include tuples of variable length? So in this case, what happens if I do 1 2 3 hello, hi, bye, and if I include something like extra element? In this case, this technique won't work. So remember, okay, let me run it and show you. ABC comma D. So in this case, it would give me an error. There you go, it gave me an error. That's because it's saying not enough values to unpack, expected 4 but got 3. We can only make this work inside a list containing tuples of equal size. So if first tuple is of size 3, the second tuple should also be of size 3. Then only this should work. So if I try to run it, it would be perfect. Okay, let me remove this actually, because I actually included an extra element. So if I try to remove it, you'd see it is running correctly. Let me clear the screen. Okay, so those were the brief usage of for loops. Now in loops, there are two important concepts called break and continue. So we use a break to break out of a particular loop, while we use continue to move on to the next iteration of loop. We will learn more about continue. So for now, let's learn about break. Okay, let me quickly create a list. And let me access individual elements and print it. Okay, now let's make use of the break statement. So what break statement does, as I told you before, is break statement is used to break out of the loop. So let's actually break out of the loop once we find the number 3. So for that, we can make use of conditional. So we say if I equals to 3, print 3 is found, and we break it. So as I told you that we use break to break out of the loop. So let's print it and find out. So in this case, what it did is I iterated through the list values, and it is constantly checking, hey, is the value that I got is equal to 3? If yes, then print 3 is found and then get out of the loop. Now in this case, this thing is evaluated false, so it just completely skips the if statement and prints the I. So 1 is not equal to 3, so it printed 1 and went on to the next iteration. And next iteration, the value acquired is 2, and 2 is not equal to 3, so it printed out 2 and exited, moved on to the next iteration. And now in the third iteration, the value acquired is 3 and 3 is equal to 3. So what it did is it printed 3 is found and it breaks. So one thing to remember is that when you use break, whatever you write below this won't be executed and it will come directly out of the for loop. So if I do like print I am outside for loop, you would see this in much better way. There you go. So once break statement is encountered, whatever is written inside the for loop below break is completely ignored and it breaks out, and hence it printed I am outside for loop. Okay, so that's how you use break. Now let's make use of continue statement. And as I told you before, continue moves on to the next iteration of loop, right? So how is it different from the normal iteration? So whenever you use continue, whatever is written below it is skipped and it moves on to the next iteration. So to show you, let me quickly give an example. Okay, let me actually use that example as well. Okay, cool. For loop, let me clear the screen. Okay, so instead of break, let's use continue. So as I told you before, continue would skip the iteration and would move on to the next iteration instead of breaking out of the loop. So in this case, what it did is it iterated through the loop, and whenever 3 value is encountered, it would print 3 is found and it would continue. So if we remove continue, and I will show you once more, let me clear the screen again, and if I try to run it, you would see that when 3 is encountered, this value is set to true. It will print 3 is found, and after coming out of the if, it will also print 3. So in this case, 1, 2, 3 is found, 3, and then 4. Now if I use continue here, continue, what it does is it will print 3 is found, and whenever continue is set, whatever is written inside for loop and below continue won't be executed for only that iteration. So that means for this iteration, 3 won't be printed. So let's run it, and you would see that 3 is found and 3 below it is not printed. So in the above case, 3 was printed, and in the below case, 3 is not printed, because as I told you before, continue will skip whatever is written below only for that particular iteration, while break will completely take you out of the loop. So if I type break, you'd say 1, 2, 3 is found and I'm outside the loop. And I think you got the point of using break and continue. Now in programming, you'd encounter many times when people use something called nested for loops. Nested for loops. Let me clear the screen. So nested for loop is using multiple for loops inside a single for loop. For example, let's say for I in, let's pass a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, you can also do that, but it is not recommended because you need to pass a variable. Let's pass another loop, say for j in say a, b, c. Let's print I, j, and j. If I were to run it, you would see that it print me a lot of things. Okay, so first of all, what it did is it went on to the first loop. It accessed the first element 1, and then it came to the second loop and accessed the first character a, and it printed that. Now the second time, instead of going back to the first again, it would try to complete this for loop execution, right? So here we are having for j in abc. It will try to complete the for loop ABC inside the first for loop, and then once it's completed, then only it will go and access the second value. In this case, it will access the first value, say 1, and then it came inside the second loop and it accessed A, it printed 1A. Then if you look at the terminal, it accessed the second value from the string, that is character from the string, that is B, along with the above one. You remember, this is still at the first value, so it printed B, and it printed the final character inside the second for loop, that is C, and still the value is first. And hence, after completing the entire second for loop, it then moves on to access the second value and then continues. So you can say 1abc, 2abc, all the way till 5abc. So that was about how you use the nested for loops. And remember that nested for loops can become very complicated and lengthy when you use multiple for loops. So it's very necessary to implement break and continue loops accordingly to reduce or achieve your desired output. So that was about a basic introduction to nested for loops. Now you can actually set a loop to run a particular amount of times. So for that, we make use of range function. Now let's use that. Okay, for example, I can type, let me clear the screen first. So for that, you type for I in range 10, you pass the integer and then print I. What it does is, if I run it, it will print all the values from 0 till 9. So it's pretty evident that whatever value you enter at the end won't be executed, or you can say won't be included. So here 10 is not included. So in this case, you can say that it has printed all the values from 0 till 9. So you can say the loop has run 10 times, right? Now if I type 20, the loop has run 20 times. Now you can also use this to print the values. So let's print the values from 1 till 10. For that, you pass the first starting index, starting value, which is 1, and the stopping index or stopping value. So if you write 20, you will notice that it will only print till 19. So it has started from 1 and it had printed till 19. So to include it, you need to add +1 to it. So that's basically, in layman's term, the starting value is included and the ending value is excluded. So if I try to print it, it will print till 20. So that was about how you make use of range. So range, generally we make use to run the loop that many number of times the value that we set as a parameter to range. So if you type 5, the loop will run 5 times and so on. Okay, so that was about the basic range introduction. So okay, one more thing is that if you are trying to print numbers, say 1 till 10, and if you want to skip some values in between, so if I say, if you want to print all the odd numbers, I want 1, then 3, then 11, I can put a step of 2, which says, hey, whenever I loop through, I want to loop in such a way that I want to start from 1 end till 10, and every loop should skip a value by 2. So what I meant is, it will start with index 1, it will end at index 10, and once 1 is printed, the next time when I access the value, it's not the value, it's not, I won't print 2, instead I would print 1 plus 2, that is 3, and so on. So in this case, 1 plus 2 is 3, then 3 will be printed, then 3 plus 2 is 5, and so on. So if I want to print, say 1, 4 and things like that, I will give a step of 3, and I think you got the point of using step. So that was about range. Now let's talk about while loops. Now you might be thinking, hey, how is it different from for loop? First of all, let me clear the screen. So we can say that while loop will run as long as a condition inside it is met, and we will see exactly what I meant by it. So we can say that for loop does not make use of conditionals, but while loop make use of conditionals. Now you can use while loops to iterate through the values of lists, tuples, dictionaries, and so on and so forth. But that is pretty complicated because you have to make use of length and things like that. So I recommend you to stick with for loops only for now, because it's very simple and very straightforward to use that. So as long as that conditional is true, while loop will keep on running infinitely. To understand it better, let's take an example. So let's say x equals to 0, and we'd say while x less than 10, print x and increment the value by 1. Now remember, we used this plus equals to in the initial videos of this tutorial, and if you want to revisit, you can revisit that tutorial to understand more. Okay, so in this case, what it happens is that x initially is assigned a value of 0. Now 0 is less than 10. Yes, it is true. And as I told you before, while loop will run as long as the condition inside is true. So it entered inside, it will print x value, and it will increment the x value by 1. I'll tell you the reason very soon. It has printed all the way till 9. That's because 9 at that moment 9 is less than 10. It's still true. It will print 9 and it will increment. Now the x value is 10 here. It will compare is 10 less than true, which evaluates to false, and it automatically breaks out of the loop, while loop. Now to tell you why x plus 1 is pretty important here, let me actually comment this one out. And if I try to run it, okay, let me actually comment this one out, take this one out as well. Now if you remember, I told you that as long as this condition inside is true, this while loop will keep on running forever. To tell you that if I run it, you'll see it is still printing the value 0. So in order to stop it, I need to press Control C and it will automatically stop, because Control C is the by default value for keyboard interrupt. To show you that once more, let me actually type true, and let's actually increment this as well. Now in this case, I have by default hard-coded the value as true. So this will keep on incrementing and printing the value. So first time it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, and the value keeps going on and on. So let me clear it. And if I try to run it again, you would understand it much better. As you can see, this value keeps on increasing because the condition inside is true. Now, as I told you, you should not leave while loops open, because at certain point of time, because computers have certain limited amount of memory assigned, and once the memory is full, your computer system crashes. So in order to come out of this, I can interrupt this process by pressing Ctrl C. Okay, so that was about the while loop. Remember in the previous video, we said that any variable which has some value is already evaluated to be true. So if I type any value, say some string, it will also is valued to true and it will go on forever. And similarly, if I type any number and if I run it, it will also be evaluated to true by default. And remember, 0 is by default evaluated to be false, so it won't enter the while loop and it will print nothing. Alright, so those were about for loops and while loops. I hope you really enjoyed this video, and if you really liked it, you can support us. The easiest one is to really like and subscribe, and you can spread the word to others who really want to learn about Python and some other tutorials that we have at ZBunker. Okay, that was all for today's video. Alright guys, see you on the next lecture.